tends to be a fairly light lecture. It's very nice coming off of 2 full weeks of very intense, heavy lectures with React. We're going to talk about some tooling tonight. I'm certain you've all gone through your training kit prep and you have seen what tonight is going to entail. Let me also say tonight is a light lecture, but this unit or this sprint is not a light sprint. So there are going to be some pretty difficult lectures, but take a deep breath. Tonight's a pretty chill lecture. We're going to talk about some really cool stuff with React that allows us to use React and allows us to build more stable applications and do that faster. So we're going to talk about something called Create React App tonight, which you have all been using unbeknownst to you, or maybe beknownst to you this whole time. And we're going to talk about something called prop types, which allow us to create a more stable application and allow us to type check our data. So without further ado, let's get started. I'm going to share my screen. And you should see a blank terminal here. So I want to pull this up because I want to share this with you. It's one of my favorite things. React came out in about 2013, and when it came out, there was a whole lot of boilerplate. They had to set a lot of things up in order for our browser to understand React. React is pretty, React kind of does its own thing, and a browser cannot just read React and understand what's going on right off the bat. When it first came out, we first of all had to use React Create Elements. We had to use ES5, and we had to get it to talk to our browser in the way that allowed us to use a single page application with React. There's a great tweet that I tweeted in even 2016. I retweeted it, and it was this little Mark was almost ready to implement his Hello World React app. We used to have to plug so many different things in order to use React, even just to get anything to appear on the screen. So behind the scenes of React, there is something called Babel, and let's go check out Babel. Babel.js. Babel is Babel.js. Let's just look at it. Where is it at? So Babel is being used behind the scenes in React, where Babel will take the latest versions of JavaScript and it will output ES5 compatible versions of JavaScript. So it does all that for us automatically. That's why we're able to use ES6 and beyond within our application without worry that it's going to break on an older browser, etc. So let's just go look in here real quick. Let's go try it out, and let's do something ES6y that we've been doing. Let's get rid of all that. So let's do const my array. Let's do const my object. And then we'll do something like const key name equals name of key. I'm just trying to think of some funky ES6, 7, 8 JavaScript stuff. Let's go key name. And let's do a spread on my array. Let's see what this gives us. All right, so this is all ES6 stuff, right? We're using this the block key name syntax in my object here to give it a variable. We are using the spread operator of my array. We're using const, right? Const doesn't exist in ES5, right? And so then we can see on the other side how it then spits out exactly what we need the ES5 way. Wish I could make that a little bit bigger. I cannot. All right, so now it's going to rewrite all of our JavaScript so that it's backwards compatible with ES5, right? So all ES5 is backwards compatible with ES6 and 7, and everything is backwards compatible, or forwards compatible, I should say. But all of these new things are not backwards compatible. So we need something to redo that. So it sets a defined property function, and it makes sure that it understands the property of the key. It sets that value, etc., and does a lot of really cool things behind the scenes for us. So this is one tool that's happening behind the scenes for us. It's called Babel, and there's a ton of, right? You can see all the presets that we have. Stage 0, so the 0, 1, 2, and 3. These are the before certain features get added to the language, they go through 4 stages. They start at stage 3 and they work their way up to stage 0. And stage 0 tends to be pieces of the language that are definitely going to be adopted, but 1, 2, and 3 might not be. So we can use experimental features if we use stage 0 or 1, right? Or 3. We see we have a React one here. We have TypeScript. We have something called Flow. There's a bunch of different presets we can use with Babel. So Babel is considered a transpiler for us. It will take code and it will transpile that into comprehensible code that the browser can read. All right, that's one piece of the thing that we used to have to set up in our little Create React or our React world down here. Another piece we set up, something called Webpack. Webpack is something that you should eventually learn, but you don't have to know it right now. This is what it does is it takes a whole lot of stuff. So if you ever wonder why we can import a CSS file into our React file and then it just shows up as CSS, it's because of Webpack. It takes all of the files and we have to configure it ourselves, okay? And then it outputs it, spits it out as maybe one JavaScript file or JavaScript and CSS file. We can import, images, and we can import all kinds of things. We can import, this is the reason we can import multiple JavaScript files into our index file, right? So it takes care of the entire dependency tree. It goes and grabs all of the NPN modules, and then it minifies everything to like one file, and gives us that file, and that's the file we serve up. So setting up Webpack is traditionally very difficult. What's the documentation? I wanted to show you some, let me try to see if I can find a actual production Webpack that I have worked on in the past. Give me 1 second. There we go. And let's just open up. So this is a actual Webpack configuration from a production application that I've worked on in the past. So this isn't too bad either. A lot of stuff. Let's see if we can find something else. Custom. Go into there. That's not too bad. Let's go dev. Maybe dev works. I want to show you how wild. It's not too bad either. But you can see we do have to know exactly how to write these files, how to correctly use plugins, how to import certain things, Webpack paths, set our own rules based on JSX using regular expressions, things like this. It takes a while to learn it. It's not an easy tool to learn quickly, okay? But it's being used in the back. 2015, we used to have to configure our own Webpack. So we used to have to configure Webpack, we used to have to configure Babel, configure our NPM, and then get it all to play together to spit out the little hello world on our page, okay? And that's what we used to have to do until something called Create React App came around. Before Create React App, there were a ton of other, what I would call React boilerplate. You would go to GitHub, you would fork someone's React boilerplate setup, and it would really be up to them how they built it. And then you could start using it. Another thing that we haven't set up is hot reloading, which Create React App does. And so we used to have to do that. Facebook then saw the need, and they're like, okay, this is a little intense. Beginner users aren't able to work with React. That's an issue for us. So let's create our own boilerplate called Create React App. Create React App came around and really changed quite a bit the entire React ecosystem in the world of React. And so now we are going to install it using an NPM package. And an NPM package is going to go in, it's going to install all the dependencies it needs, and it's going to set up our Webpack, it's going to set up our Babel, it's going to set all of this stuff up for us, all of our hot reloading, everything for us, and allow us to just jump right out the gate and start writing code. We're going to do a real quick Create React App demo, and we'll learn from it there. If you do not have the latest version of Node or NPM installed, might be a good idea to do that. Otherwise, you can use NPM. We're going to use something called, let me just, we use something called NPX. So NPX is part of NPM, although it's not going to, whereas if you use NPM, NPM goes and downloads the entire package, and if we save it globally, it'll save it to our computer. With NPX, it'll go and temporarily download it and use it for us. So I can say NPX, Create React App. Okay, so that is the official name. Oh, of course, that is the official name of the package. It's create-react-app. Okay. If you want to install it globally, just give it the G flag and it'll install it globally for you. Give me a second here, just watch it install. Once you have something installed globally on your machine, in a second, you can then use it as you would anywhere else, any other program on your terminal here. Or another way of doing it is to use NPX. And what it'll do is it will go and install this, and then it will call that command. So Create React App, any of you from your TK learning know what comes after Create React App when we want to build a new React component, build a new React project. Yeah, the name of the app or the name of the project we want to build. So let's just do React demo if I haven't already done that. Press enter. And now what it's going to do is it's going to go and get Create React App for us. And then we can see here now CRA, which is commonly known as, is building our React application. Okay. So we have a little bit of warnings. Warnings are okay for us right now. It's going to take a minute. If you have Node, you have NPM. Yes. Not sure if you have Node, if you have NPX. You have to have the latest version of Node and NPM to have NPX. I don't think it's the latest. I think it's just a later version. Okay. So now that we have run our Create React app. Let's walk through it real quick. 1 out of 4, it's gotten all of our packages for us, or it fetched them. It's linking all of our dependencies for us. That's where we're getting our warnings. And then it is taking all of the packages we already had, and then creating a new package for us. All right. We have a lock file. We'll go through that in a minute. Current version of Yarn is out of date. That's fine. That's a warning. If you had an error there, you would need to change that. It's a warning, so change it eventually. To upgrade, run the following. That's fine. And then it'll tell you all of the things that it installed. So it installed React DOM, React Scripts, which is running Webpack behind the scenes for us, and it installed React. Okay. So we know we needed React DOM and React, right? Those are 2 packages we need. And React Scripts is going to be running all of the transpiling and all of that thing behind the scenes for us. You can do this in Git Bash. That's how we have Git Bash. This is just a Bash terminal here, okay? So this works in Git Bash. Once we have downloaded these 3 packages, we see that we have gotten Babel preset React app. So it takes all of React has its own Babel preset plugin. We have a Webpack plugin here. Some polyfills, dev utilities, React DOM, some error, overlay, React, and some worker processes. Okay, so we have a bunch of stuff that it downloaded and linked up for us. Now then it gives us some instructions. I answered this question, Melvin, is there a benefit of using one or the other, NPX versus NPM, and installing globally? The only benefit of using NPX is that you don't have to install it on your computer. Okay, so sometimes, let's say you're working on a remote server and you don't want to, or you don't have the permissions to globally install a package, you can use NPX. If you're using it on your own computer and you're going to be using the package quite often, you can use npm and save it, and then you don't have to go reinstall it every time you want to use it. So there's a couple of different reasons to use one or the other. All right, let's walk through this once more. Initialize a Git repository. So it automatically initializes a Git repository for us. We don't have to Git init it. All right, we do have to plug it in if we want to use it with Git. Success, create React app, created React demo, and it gives us the path that it created the folder at. It's telling us that this is a directory, React demo is. We're going to have to change directories into that eventually. Inside the directory, once you are inside the directory, and this is very important, you have to go inside of that directory. You can run several commands. The first is yarn start. Yarn start is what we're going to be using quite a bit. Yarn build is going to build a production file for us of the app, and that will allow us to serve that app in a production environment, which we will do later on. But build is going to take everything and it's going to optimize everything in our application for that build process. Test is going to run our test. So we could have some unit tests in here, and yarn test will run them for us. And then eject is something that you really want to do only if you need to. If you do this, you can't go back. They mean that you can't go back. It's going to change your Git. It's going to change everything. So you cannot go back if you eject. If you reject, it's always a good idea to save a copy of your app before you eject in a different place, because you can't go back. But what it does is it takes you out of the CRA environment, and then it allows you to fine tune your Webpack and your Babel and all of that stuff the way you want to do it. Okay. Ejecting is only for very, very, very advanced reasons, production level apps. Can you git commit before you eject and rewind to that commit if necessary? I'm sure you can. it's a difficult process. And really, for all of you right now, there is zero reason to eject for the foreseeable future. The main build is pretty good for almost everything. Even if you go to your React app, let's find ejecting on here. Let's see, where are we at? You can eject to a custom setup at any time. Oh, it usually has a big warning about it. It used to. You'll need to maintain this configuration yourself. So you will need to make sure that you stay on top of all of the advancements of Webpack and Babel and all of that. You can use less without ejecting. That's fine. You just have to use it in a different way than you might with Webpack. You can use it the same way we've always been doing it, though. Okay. So Create React App is a great fit for learning React, starting a new application, creating an example, etc. There's some other advanced stuff on here, maybe not. They kind of trimmed down their documentation here quite a bit because it used to be very, very, very fully loaded docs. But this is really all you need for right now in their documentation, okay? So what's included? Your environment will have everything you need to build a modern single-page React app. React, JSX, ES6, even in TypeScript and Flow if you want to use it. Okay, TypeScript and Flow, we're going to learn about a sort of a precursor to both of those today. But these are, TypeScript is a strongly typed JavaScript language that transpiles to JavaScript, but it actually it maintains your types. Okay. Language extras beyond ES6, so ES7 and 8, like the object spread operator, which we have been using. Auto prefix CSS, so it's going to prefix all of our CSS for us. Okay, pretty amazing stuff. Unit test runner, live development server that warns about common mistakes and hot reloads for us. Allows us to bundle JS, CSS images for production with hashes and source maps. Amazing. So a lot of stuff it does for us that we used to have to set all of this stuff ourselves. Let's go back in and let's see how to get started. So to get started, we are going to need to cd into the folder we just created. So we're going to cd into React demo. And once we're in there, then we can yarn start. Let me just tell you that every single one of you is going to miss this step at some point. Okay, you're going to miss that step. You're going to yarn install. You're going to yarn start. It's not going to work. You're going to bang your head on your keyboard, wondering why it doesn't work. And it's just going to be super frustrating. And then an hour later, you're going to realize that you forgot to cd into the actual folder. All right, just remember that when it happens, think back to this and be like, yeah, it was right. It did happen. Cool. Once we are in that folder, we can see we have a README file, our node modules, it's already installed, package.json that's already built for us, a public folder, a source folder, and what's called a yarn lock file. It will happen, Allie. It happens to me often. Okay, so I'm just going to open up. I've got a shortcut on there for those of you that wondered how I just opened that. You can go into VS Code and set that up for your terminal, so you can just type code. All right, so let's just look at this first before we jump in and start working with our Create React app. So package.json, this is where all of our configuration is going to be built from. Okay. When we type yarn start, this is what it's going to do. It's going to look at start and it's going to run this command in our terminal for us. All right. React scripts is going to essentially build our entire application on the fly, and it's going to do something called hot reloading it. Build is going to go React scripts build, React scripts test, React scripts inject. You can set these up. You can change these to do anything you want. For now, we're going to leave this until we really understand it, and you really start to change this when you get to Node. It has an EOSLint config automatically built in if you have EOSLint installed. We have our dependencies in here. These are the only 3 dependencies we need, all right, for this application so far. And then it has some other stuff browser list. So it's greater than the 0.2% of the lowest browsers, not dead, means that it always is only going to work on browsers that have continuous support or LTS, not Opera Mini. Apparently Opera Mini doesn't work with React. And then it's going to say for development, we want one of these 3 browsers, Chrome, Firefox, or Safari, and the latest version, or the last 2 versions. All right, that's our package lock or package JSON. Yarn lock is kind of cool. This is a new type of file that came about a couple years ago, and it happened because when we have these dependencies in here, like this dependency changes frequently, and this little caret, this up caret here, means the latest version after 16.8.6. Okay, so imagine you built this project 3 years ago, and it said the latest version after like 11.2.0. Well, 16.8.6 is incredibly different than 11.2.0, and it probably has a lot of breaking changes to it. So we have introduced something called a lock file. So not only do we have our package JSON, which tells us kind of what we're looking for, but our lock file tells us the exact version. Okay, so if we go to React, let me just find it. No, of course not. I guess it doesn't have. There's only 85 of these. I'm just going to go find it. These are all the packages we have installed, and it's kind of crazy. Okay. Yeah. I just saw the yellow on it. There we go. All right. Ooh, we don't have our full React in here. React scripts. React, there we go. So we see that we are using 16.8.6. If I still have the same lock file in 2 years from now, yeah, I could do that. Then it will still continue to use 16.8.6. If I don't have this lock file and it goes based purely on the package JSON, it's going to find the latest version, and it might break things. So this lock file was intended to maintain the same environment as it was developed in over time. Okay, so that's what this lock file is for. It's really, really an amazing feature. And npm also has a lock file. It's called package lock.json. It makes it not update. That is correct. And so lock file should be committed to your Git history, whereas packages like node modules is not. And our Git ignore it says, do not commit our node modules. All right. So another thing is our README. You've already seen this README. It's the same one that's on the Create React app page on GitHub. All right, let's get down to the nitty gritty now. Public file folder, excuse me. Our public folder contains things like our icon, our favicon. All right, it contains things something called a manifest, where we don't need to worry about this for now. You can worry about this much later. But it contains our index.html file. All right, and so this is our index.html file where we are going to have our div with our root that we're going to connect to. If you want to come in here and change the title, let's just go Lambda tool PT 7, 6, React, we'll just say CRA demo. All right, we can change the title in here. We can add some SEO stuff in here. We tend to have like all of our basic meta tags, like our viewport is already in here set up for us. You know, we have a theme color if we want to use it. The manifest, it needs to use it. It needs to use the manifest so that it can find the files properly, that kind of thing. We really don't mess with this file out too often, okay? We want to just leave our public folder pretty standard. If we need to add anything to the head, that's where we do it. Otherwise, we leave it alone, okay? And then we see our node modules. Boom, you can look through them all if you want. Those are all the node modules. And then our source. Our source is the big one for us, okay? Our source is where all of our entire app is going to live. And it's where the create React app React scripts is going to look for our entire app, okay? So you're going to see something like app CSS, app, which we all know what app is. We've been using it for a while. We have a test folder in here, file in here that's going to run some unit tests for us. We have our index CSS, our index file, and we'll go through all this in a minute. And then something called the service worker, which is going to will allow us to create a progressive web application. We're not going to worry about this right now, but if you want to read more about it, you can go to that link, and it'll tell you more about it. But yeah, so let's go to our index.js file. And first, we're going to yarn start. So you see it's going to run React. Let's go. Where is it at again? Run start. So it'll open it up for you. But let's go into here. And we'll go to localhost. Localhost means our computer, the machine we're running on, also known as 127.0.0.1. Okay, same thing. Or we can just call it localhost. And the port that it's running on. And this is currently running on port 3000. So we can now see that our React app is up and running, and we have our basic Create React app page here. All right. We see that we can check it out. If you're on a local network, you can run it from your phone. You can test it from an iPad, etc., on your local network, or you can run it from your local host. Okay. And you can now view React demo in the browser. Note that the development build is not optimized. To create a production build, use the yarn build. And we'll do that in a little bit. So let's go and start messing with some stuff in here. First thing I do, I always just remove the service worker unless you are planning on creating a progressive web application. Remove the service worker. I remove the line from it, and I delete the file. All right. Save it. You should go back to your page. Nothing has broken. All right. Let's come back into our VS Code. I'm going to leave what we have in here in our index.js file. And I'm going to move in, delete our tests for now. You will want unit tests eventually, but for now, you don't need to worry about them. We want to just clean this up as much as possible. I'm going to come in here and I'm going to, I don't need to worry about removing anything from there. I am going to remove the logo. And then I'll remove logo from there. And where is it at? There it is. I'll save that. And now you'll see that our logo is gone. Okay. And then let's go hello from inside our React application. Save that. And this cool thing about Create React App is that it hot reloads and we can see our changes instantly happen in here. Also notice our title, Lambda School PT6 Create React App Demo. And so that is how you get started building your own React application on your computer using Create React App. So you have used it in the past. You just didn't realize that you were using it, or you may have realized, but you have been using it. But this is how you can go start up a React app and get going automatically on your own computer. So that was a lot of talking and walking through that. Are there any questions on Create React App? Pretty simple, pretty amazing that we have this tool now and that we can get up and going very fast. Update the lock file, very simple. You go in, you can either delete it and reinstall, and it will create a new lock file based on the package versions it installs, or you can come in here and manually update it, or you can update it using the command line. There's a couple of different ways to do that. Deleting it and reinstalling is like the hard and fast way of just getting the latest versions of everything. Any other questions right now? All right. If there aren't, then let's take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to learn about prop types, and then I'll show you a little build action. Let's go 5-minute timer. And I will see you back here in 5 minutes. All right, everybody, come on back and we will continue on. So we just went over create React app and how to get a React application running locally on our machine so that we can develop an actual React application on our machine without using something like the likes of Code Sandbox, which is not a production development environment. It's more of just a quick play around with something sandbox environment. I'm going to stop this from running, and I am going to move to Code Sandbox so that we can talk about another piece of React tooling, which is our prop types. So we all know that JavaScript is a loosely typed language. What that means is that we don't have to declare our types when creating things like variables or arrays, when we create parameters in our functions. If you have ever worked with another programming language, and especially a strongly typed programming language, you'll know that you have to do something like, you create a function, let's just say function, something, say you want it to be a name, and you want that to be a string, you have to usually do something like this, and you want it to be an array, to be like friends. You would go something like that, so that you would define the type before you ever used it. What this is good for is this is good because we always know what type we would use. We know that name is always going to be a string, and if it's not a string, it's going to break our entire program. So we know it always has to be a string. We know that friends is always going to be an array of strings. Yeah, it'll yell at you, it'll break your program, it'll say like, hey, you've messed it up, this is supposed to be a string and it's a number instead. In JavaScript, we can do something like this, and then do something like this. And that's totally fine, right, in JavaScript. We just initialized name as a string of my name, and then later on, we changed name to the number 12, okay? We can see where errors might start to pop in. If we always expect name to be a string, then it always has to remain a string, but there's no way for us to enforce that rule. So instead, what we do is something like this. We go if type of name does not equal string, then, return something, whatever. So we'd have to set up our own rules to type check like this. In React, oftentimes we want to make sure that the data that we are passing our components in the form of props is of a certain type. Our props or our components are going to expect to get data back, and that data needs to be a certain type. If we think back to our Harry Potter exercises last week, we knew that those students individually had to be objects. They had to be objects with certain property or keys on those objects, right? Certain properties or keys on those objects. And they had to be formed like that. If they weren't formed like that, then it would break our application. Our component was expecting it to be in that exact way. And so we can build our React applications based on this idea of like an honor code and a promise that we're always going to provide it, the data in this proper form. But that only goes a certain way. It only works if we ourselves are building everything that interacts with that component, are controlling all of the data that component interacts with, and that we're not using any external data like a server, an external API, or user input, or something like that. Okay. So there's been a couple of ways that we can enforce rules based on this. So I showed you TypeScript earlier. TypeScript is a pseudo language that is built on JavaScript that maintains real types and will yell at you. It'll treat JavaScript like a strongly typed language. It's gained a lot of popularity, but it does have a steep learning curve to it. And it's not only do you have to learn JavaScript, but then you also have to learn TypeScript syntax. React came up with a language really before TypeScript got really popular called Flow, and essentially does the same thing, but in a React ecosystem. The least we can do is something called prop types. Okay, prop types used to be a part of React and part of the core React. We would say, we'd do something like this. React.prop types. We used to be able to do this. The maintainers of React, after the advent of Flow and TypeScript, realized that they wanted to be, and first of all, don't take this. This is the old way of doing things. They wanted to be less opinionated and allow us to bring in our own type checking, whatever we wanted to use for type checking. So they removed prop types from the core library and made it its own module. So what we can do now is if we want to use prop types, we need to import them as a dependency. So we can add dependency and we can search for prop types. And you're going to want to go with the prop types, which has 31 million downloads versus the prop type, which has 1.9 thousand. So go with prop types. This is the one that's been released by Facebook, the maintainers of React. And we are going to add that as a dependency. Oops. Thanks. I got to clear out I'm not authorized. 1 second. Keep this one. Let's go. Boom. I'm going to go just delete a bunch of sandboxes. Delete all of our Harry Potter sandboxes. Move the trash. Delete a couple of them for right now, in case we have to do more than one. Okay. Now let's see if we can do it. Oh, I got it. Prop types. All right, it's in there. Okay. So prop types needs to be added as a dependency. And let's go take a look at the prop types documentation. Of course, it opened on the wrong screen for me. Okay, type checking with prop types. So using prop types can be a little bit of a learning curve at first, but once you understand how it works, it's pretty simple to go in and use it to create type checking on your React application. So first thing first, React.PropTypes has moved into a different package since React version 15.5. That's what I was talking about before. Please use the prop types library instead. As React grows, you can catch a lot of bugs with type checking. Some applications, you can use JavaScript extensions like Flow or TypeScript. I already talked about that. Even if you don't use those, the bare minimum thing you should be using is prop types, okay? It allows us to check our props and to check our props to make sure that they are the type that we are expecting them to be. And it's pretty simple. We're going to take our class or our function, and we are going to extend .prop types on it, okay? We are then going to outline what our props should look like. So we could call this our prop schema, where we're going to say the key should be this type, okay? So prop types itself, the package or the library that we are going to import, maintains its own definitions of strings and numbers and etc. So we can just start by working with those. And we are going to jump into our little Pokemon app here. And where's that? No, there it is. Close that, close that, close that. Keep that open. It does remind you of Prototype. I understand that. But know that with ES6, we're not messing with Prototype anymore. So we don't really have to worry about that. So let's go into our files. Okay. Oh, no. Wait. There we go. Okay. We're going to go to Pokemon.js file. And let's look. I'm going to open a couple. Index. Let's open our app. And then we have a data file. That's the one I really want. Okay. Let's see what our app is doing here. Our app is just giving us our data, and our Pokemon.js is consuming that data. All right. So data here, we can see we have an array of objects, okay? And this array of objects has an ID, a number, a name, an image, blah, 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 everything we ever want to know about, I believe, the original Pokemon, all of the original Pokemon. I don't think there's any, 151 on here, okay? All you Pokemon people out there know more than I do about it. These are all 151 of the original Pokemon, all right? So each of these is going to have these certain attributes to it, okay? These certain keys or properties to each of them. They're then going to have a weakness, which is an array. They're going to have the next evolution, which is an array of these objects that point to other Pokemon, 0, 2, right? So Bulbasaur becomes Ivysaur, etc. So we have this data that Pokemon is consuming here, all right? We are getting the props.pokemon, and let's go look at our app.js folder file. We see that Pokemon is just that state, which is that data that I just pointed out. Okay, so that is our props that we're getting in the Pokemon folder. All right. So what I need to do is make sure that the data that we're getting is the same that we are expecting. All right. So let's go and start our prop types off just straight off the beginning. And I believe we're going to do it. Let's go look and see. Does it matter if it's below or above our render? No, or our export? Let's find out. I'm going to do it below our export. So the name of this component is Pokemon. Okay, it needs to be above the export. Thank you. And we automatically have, make sure we got to know exactly how it expects it. So camel case with types. And we equal that, there should be an equals, to an object, okay? So this is telling React automatically knows this portion, how to do this. So it's going to expect us to be able to give it a schema of prop types, okay? So it's going to say like, okay, this is how we want our props to look, all right, for this component. So the first thing we need to do is import prop type from prop type. Okay. And we are going to go in here and say, we see that we have a prop of Pokemon. And what is the prop of Pokemon? What type is that? That is for you. Oh. So let's go look at it. this whole export default is being passed, and this is an array of objects. So the Pokemon prop is an array, okay? So what we can do in here, we can say we're expecting to get a prop called Pokemon, and this needs to be an array. I can't just do that. That doesn't work for us, all right? But what I can do is I can use the prop types package and say dot array, all right? And this should work, all right? So we get our, I forked it, of course. If you need a zoom, give that to you. Let's open this up a little bit higher. Let's go into our console, and we see that we get an object, is our props. We have a console log props here, and Pokemon is an array here. I'm not sure how it works under the scene or behind the scenes, Benedict. I'm sure it's using type of and some very strict type checking behind the scenes. You probably could make your own types of classes. And I'm thinking maybe, well, I don't want to guess on that of what prop types itself is using. I would say that's probably using TypeScript now. Okay, so we gotta close this. Okay, we'll close our console there. So it's all working for us. Well, how do we know it's working? What if we just change this to make it so it's not what we expect it to be? Let's open our console. And now we are getting a warning on this, okay? We just changed that to expect Pokemon to be a number instead of an array, and we're getting this warning. Failed prop type, invalid prop Pokemon of type array supplied to Pokemon, and it expected it to be a number, all right? So this is saying, hey, what that data you gave me, I expected that to be a number, and it came back and it's actually an array. All right, so there's our prop working for us, our prop types working for us, our type checking working for us there. No, we're not creating custom types here. We're going based purely on our prop types. And here's a list of all the types we can use with prop types, okay? Optional array, we can use prop types at array, prop types at bool, function, number, object, string, symbol, node, element. All right, we got a ton of different types that are built into the prop types package that we can use. Yes, specific definitions of each type, and here's a list of them right here. And you can come in here and check out the doc for it. So we get this. And if you have come from another language, like C# or Java or any other language that uses types, strong types, or you come from, TypeScript, we do not create our own type. This is bare bones type checking here. If you do want to create your own types, if you want to create a Pokemon type, you would use something like TypeScript for that within JavaScript, okay? This is bare bones. This is like, we are just using minimal to check our data out to make sure we're using the right data. In fact, this prop types gets removed from our code when we create a production build, right? Prop types does not work in production. Prop types is only for development. We only use prop types for development, and that is just so that we can know when we're getting the right data back. And also, it's not going to break our application, right? We're going to get a fat warning on it, but it's not going to break it for us. So keep that in mind as well. as you're moving through this, especially if you have a background in any other strongly typed language. Primitives, not only primitives, an array is not a primitive, an object's not a primitive, function's not, right? But basic types, right? These are all the types we can check. And we're going to go through most of them. So looking into this, open that, close that. Does calling this array really do this data justice here? Question for you. No, not really, right? It's like, cool, it's an array, but man, there is a ton of stuff going on here that's not an array. Okay, that is beyond just a simple type of an array. Really, what we want to do is we want to document the component for future development. If we or other devs want to use this component somewhere else or do some work on it later, we need to know what props it needs to take in. So that's where the whole, the fact that it only works in dev really makes it work. So what we can do, let's go look at our prop types. We can see, where's that we have the ability to define an array of a certain type. Okay, so this says that we are going to say not only should this be an array, but this should be an array of numbers, or this should be an array of strings. If you remember back when I first wrote that little, that function that said function something friends, right? Other array string. On another language, this would be a valid way of saying this needs to be an array of strings. And in almost all other languages, arrays cannot be a mixed type at all, period. Especially when we're using props in React, we want to make sure that, and I'll just open this up a little bit more. We know that most of the time our props should be all alike. They should all be the same thing. Yeah, exactly, Benedict. So in other languages, if you have an array of numbers, they all have to be numbers. You can't have strings and numbers mixed together. In JavaScript, you can, and it's kind of funky and kind of confusing for some developers that come from other languages. So what we can do in prop types is say array of. And that is a function or a method, okay? And inside of there, we are going to give it the array of whatever type we want to give it, okay? So what we can do is we can say array of, we can go prop types dot object. And there we see that we got it good now, right? Let's go mess with something. Yeah. Let's go mess with this and say, just for the heck of it, number. Then we'll get a console again. Prop types, invalid prop, Pokemon 0, right? So it tells us it's the first one that we got hit with, of type object, supplied to Pokemon, expected it to be a number. So it's like, okay, cool. I know that it's an array, and that should be an array populated with numbers, because I said numbers right here. And they're saying, but it was an object. So now we know exactly where that happens. So now let's go in and say object. And I'm going to go change our data real quick. And let's go deep into there. And let's go 11. All right. So we now get failed prop type, invalid prop Pokemon of the index of 20. So it checks every single one of these that comes through. And it says, hey, the 21st item in that array is a number and you wanted it to be an object. So it checks every single one of them for us and it says, it's not what I expected. So it can be anywhere in here. So this is, we'll take that out and we're good to go. All right. Any questions so far on prop types and how we are using it to map out what our prop should look like? If you have an array of objects or an array of arrays, it doesn't matter what's inside of those things. We'll get to that in a moment, Benedict. But for now, we're just going to say an array of objects. Any questions so far? Right now, it would just check to see that each item in that array is an object. Yep. But you bring up a good point, right? These are objects, but they are so much more than just a simple object. They have other things to them, right? IDs, there's a number, there's a string, array of strings, an array of objects here, right? There's much more going on to this than just an array of objects. So let's go back to our prop types here, and we can see that all of our basic types are right here. Then we can get down to our different types. One of is great because it allows you to check specific items in there to see if they're equal to one of these things. So if we only are expecting news or photos, we can use one of in order to say, like, if it isn't one of these, then it's not correct. Array of, object of, okay, and this is going to check the value of that object. And then this one is super important. This one is called shape. And shape allows us to, define the shape of an object. It allows us to define an object deeply, okay? And so what we can do, instead of saying array of objects, we can give it an object, open and close brackets, and instead say shape. All right, and shape is going to expect it to be, maybe not there. Let's go without. Shape is going to expect there to be another schema inside of here, okay? So I can come in here now and say the shape of my object, and let's go look through our data for a second. Should every Pokemon have an ID? Question for you all. Should every Pokemon have an ID? Is every single one of them in here, is it going to have an ID? Yeah, I'd say that is true. Is every Pokemon going to have an egg? Let's go find out. Egg, egg, egg. Maybe. That's not something I'm intimately familiar with. Oh, there's a not in egg. Candy count and spawn time. And there's a bunch of stuff on here that I'm not super familiar with. But I know that every Pokemon should have an ID, should have a number, it should have a name, and it should have an image. Okay, at least for right now, right? So yeah, are all 151 egg types? I don't know, but I know that these four should always be there, right? We know that no matter what, no matter how much you know or don't know about Pokemon, you know that these four should always be there: an ID, a number, a name, and an image on there. Okay. So let's go in and create this. So I'm going to say ID, and then what is the value that I should give ID? Just number. Yeah, I have to use the specific prop types type checker. And there we go. And once again, if I change that to string, we should get a warning, okay, that Pokemon, the first Pokemon.id is a number and it expected a string. So when you're creating your prop types, break them, always break them at first, just to make sure it's working. That's what I always do. So I'm going to give that a number and it should fix itself. All right. I'm going to go image. And what is image going to be? Nope. Prop types dot string. Now once again, if I say number, should get an error. Okay. Name. Is there a way to check for URLs? You can probably use some regular expression and the one of, but not really. No. Let's go see. Not that I know of. Custom prop. You can make a custom prop. There you go. Your regular expression. So you can check to see if it has the URL in there. If you know how to use regular expressions, then you can use a custom prop type to check that. So yeah, you could do that, but you'd have to build that yourself. Okay. And sometimes it's worth it, and sometimes it's not. All right. So name, we're going to go prop types dot string. Yeah, it is. Okay. So we have now. Let's look. We are getting one prop, right? Our custom, we're console logging our props, getting one prop. It is the Pokemon prop. We are saying that that needs to be an array of, and then that array of should be our shape. And shape refers to an object. And not only that, but shape is going to say each object has to have these properties, has to look like this, okay? So that's what shape means. Shape means object that looks like this. If we could just say object, and it would just look to see if these were all objects. But shape allows us to actually define what each key value pair looks like, okay? And then we can see, yeah, that has an ID, which is a number which is a string, a name, which is a string, and an image, which is a string. Let's go number, and let's go prop types dot string. So, quick question. If I were to have one of these and that didn't have a name, would that still work, or would that we get a warning on that? Warning. We got a couple warnings. We got an I think it would work. Still work. Warning. All right. Looks like we're about 50-50 on this. Let's check it out. So it still works, and we don't get a warning. Why would we not get a warning on this? Because it's not saying it has to have a number or a name key of the prop type string. It's saying if there is a name key, it must be the prop type of string. Okay. So what can we do to make sure that it says if there is or isn't a name, we are requiring there to be a name? Let's go look at our prop types. And we can see here in our next value here that we have this is required validator on here. Okay. So in any of these, we can say this is required. If we don't have is required and it's not there, it's not going to throw an error for us. It's just going to continue on saying, well, it's not there, so it doesn't have to match this, right? But if we have that is required, then it has to match it. So let's go add that to the end of our prop type. And now we get that error. And now it's saying, hey, just so you know, that thing is supposed to be required, but it's undefined, okay? And let's go back in. Let's add that in, and now we're good to go. All right. So the things that we want to make sure that are there, no matter what, we have to say is required on those. I think all 4 of these things should be required. Let's go look at what we need. ID, image, and name. So we don't even need the number. So let's not even put it on the number because that's not required for our app right now, right? Because we're using the ID, the image, and the name in here. So if we didn't have one of those, it would break our app, okay? So if we didn't have the number, it wouldn't break our app because we're not using that in this component. Does that make sense? Yeah, we're only using the pieces of that prop, of that object. We're only using the ID, image, and name pieces. So the other pieces are fine to have in there. We would want them to have that data, but they're not required, right? We really want to require things that would break our app is what we want to require, okay? Because if I didn't have, let's go name on there, that would, why are we getting a okay on that one? No problems. Save that, save that. Of course. So I'm not gonna lie, CodePen does this to me all the time when I'm doing prop types, and it starts to glitch on me a little bit. And this is just a CodePen thing, where it doesn't throw an error for me. Ugh, bugs me. So like that. There we go. Okay, and this should actually break our app too. It's only CodePen with prop types, or Code Sandbox, excuse me, that it'll occasionally not do my proper prop type checking. But for the most part, you're going to be writing prop types in your own application, and it works every time. Just in Code Sandbox, it's a little finicky. All right, any questions on this right now? What if I have an empty property as in how? How do you mean, Aaron? An empty property in, so I did something like this. Like that. That's going to break because this is an actual object and we need a value for each key. All right. Well, that's not going to ever happen either unless it's undefined, right? I can't have a no value in an object. Undefined is fine, but it should move, of course. This happened to me last time I did this too. Code Sandbox. There we go. It should, if it's required, break, right? It's going to require, if it's required, it's going to break because a key with a value of undefined is the same as an object that key doesn't exist on, that object. Both the same thing, okay? No, would break it. because it's marked as required, but its value is null. Yep. There we go. See some more typing, so I'll give it a moment. It's a great question, Sam. Why this is needed? Because as we develop our application, we should expect an external API, if we are using an external API, for it to continue giving us the same information, the same data. Most of the time, as well, we're using internal APIs to build our applications. And we need to make sure that the data that we're getting back from our APIs is the correct data as we build it. To be honest, there's no way, even if using TypeScript, of checking an API, the data that comes back from it, right? Think about that. What this does, TypeScript, flow, prop types, this is all type checking on our development environment. This is all type checking to make sure that we don't accidentally pass something, a data type that's different than what we're expecting, okay? Yeah, the Pokemon API might say we're not going to have IDs anymore, and then your app's going to break no matter what. Any app will break. This is not a compiled app. This is an app that's running in real time, and your app's going to break. And so, no matter what you're using, this is just a way of adding one more layer of security to your app as you are building it. So that you know you have a bit more peace of mind that it's going to work the way you expected it to. Does that make sense? Still relying on the API, absolutely. You might get corrupted data, and you have no control over that, unfortunately. All right, let's take a 5-minute break. We'll come back and we'll finish up. All right, everybody, come on back. Let's finish this thing up and get you started on your project tonight. Okay, so we have talked about a few different things with our crop types. We've talked about creating an array of, creating a shape. So, just so you know, if Pokemon was an object, we could use crop types.shape instead of crop types.array of, right? Just because we want to build the shape of that object out. And so you can use these wherever you see if they have a need. So let's go to check something else out. So in data, we are going to have a type, right? Oh, this is a little confusing. We're going to have a Pokemon type, right? And this type is going to have one of these. Any Pokemon experts out there know how many types there are? Oh, I was hoping someone would do it. There's 15 types, right? I just had to count manually. 15 types of Pokemon. It's going to be one of these types, okay? So let's go out and let's create this type. Type. And what data type is type? There's 15 in the first 151, just so you know. Yeah, so it's an array. So I can say crop types.array, right? And that works. I can say array of crop types.string. Totally works. But what if I want to get really specific? And I know that there's only 15 types in the first 151 Pokemon. And I want to make sure that it's one of those types, okay? That no matter what, we don't stray outside of one of these types, right? We can use the crop type very, very, very specifically, one of, okay? So I can give it an array of strings that I would like it to be, and it has to be one of those types of strings. Enum, I believe you could do that. Where's our enum? It's on here. Oh, that's what it used to be. Okay, it's just one of now, right? So instead of array of string, I can say one of, and then pass that an array. And then we're going to see, oh, it's looked at grass. So let's just put grass in there. Expect it to be one of grass. And now it's going to say, well, I found one that's called poison, right? And we can go through poison. And now it's going to say fire. So I've got a list that I'm just going to copy paste in. Okay. And now it's going to be one of these 15 types. Let's just take fire out and see what happens. And then we get an error, right? Because it's going to find one with fire in it. Okay. The third Pokemon down has fire in it. So, or a fourth, excuse me. Here's 4. And, oh, no, type fire, right? And it's saying like, oh, I couldn't find this in the list of what you asked for, right? So we can use that one of to say it has to be an array, and the items in that array have to be in this array, okay? So you can do this for a number of different things, right? If you're specifically checking for certain items to be in that array, you can look for those certain items, right? Any questions on the one of? Absolutely, we can stack these layers deep. We can stack them as many layers deep as we need to. right? What if type was an object and there was an array on that object? We can do shape, array of, one of, etc. However, excuse me. Oh, okay, lost it. However specific we want to get with our prop types, we can get that specific, okay? Do we need to make sure? So imagine in what case will we need to make sure that it was one of these types? Just think about an imaginary case. I don't see any on here. So let me say what I would think of. Maybe I have an icon for each of these types, and I'm going to reference that icon by the type in that array. Well, if I have a type that doesn't exist in my icon list, then I'm going to get a broken application because it's not going to be able to find maybe I didn't have a dragon type in here. I didn't have a dragon icon, and I see one of these has a dragon type, and it's like, I don't know where this dragon icon is. I can't display that. That's where I would see being making sure that you have each of these types in there. Defined set specific list of options. Make sense? Yeah, so this prop types belong only to the Pokemon component, right? Yes. Only to that Pokemon component. Could one of include another type? So could I do like something like that? Sure. Yep. Is there a one of type? Yeah, there is. Okay, so I can say one of these types too, right? Documentation on prop types is pretty good. And I can be like, it can only be a string or a number. It can only be a object or an array. It can't be a string or a number, right? It can only be one of these types. So yeah, absolutely. Any other questions on this right now? Okay, so someone asked, and let me go back and find it. Sam asked, why is this needed? What if we are getting data from an API and the data isn't coming back, or it's not coming back in the shape we wanted to? If it's not coming back in the exact shape we wanted to, that's kind of like, oh, well, our app breaks, and we just have to deal with that when we come to the time that happens, and hopefully we have good reporting metrics to understand why something broke. But what if our API is taking a long time? All right, and we're going to start to deal with API next week, I believe, in fetching data. But what if it takes a long time to get that data back, and our app is just sitting there? Let me open. Oh, there we go. And what if we don't have data yet? What if we have undefined? And look at that. Our app breaks. We didn't get that data back in time. Our app loaded and it breaks. Okay. So we can say, if you don't have the correct prop, we can give it default props. Okay. So let's go and look at our Pokemon. And so, and not only it's prop types, but we can say default props. So if we don't have the props, if they don't exist, we can give it a default prop. And let's just do one of these. Let's go do like one that we don't normally get to see. And I'm just going to do these first pieces of it. So we see the default, I gave it a default prop of an empty array, and now it's not broken anymore. Now it's going to have, it's not going to show anything for us, but it's not going to break our app. And hopefully maybe we have a spinner on here that says like loading, and hopefully we give it enough time to, or shortly gets populated with the data we want. But let's just put a default prop in here. All right. And now I've just given it a default prop, waiting for the right data to come in. And now all of a sudden, our data comes in, and boom, we get it populated with what we want. Okay. So the default prop is a backup. This is a backup for if our prop does not exist. If our prop doesn't exist and we're asking for it in our component, then it's going to break our component, right? So we can say, hey, if it doesn't exist, let's just use this for right now, all right? That's how a default prop works. Any questions on that? All right. Questions. I want some questions on here. We got one more thing to go over, and that's it. How are you all feeling about these, about prop types right now? Cool. Prop types are cool. They're not required, but they make us build much safer, meaning that it's harder to break apps. Okay. Yeah, the capitalization stuff kind of sucks. It's like really hard to memorize. You're going to have to just know that the prop types and default props are part of React. They're going to be camel case, prop types, and I could have called this anything I want, but this is what we normally call it. This is just convention to call it prop types. All right. Okay, let's talk about one last thing. Let's come in here and let's see there's no next evolution. Okay, great. Let's go see the previous evolution and next evolution on these Pokemon. All right, so notice that if a Pokemon has not fully evolved, we have a next evolution on it. And if it has, we don't have a next evolution, we have a previous evolution, right? If it has evolved to the point where it could have both, right? It's right in the middle there, so it'll have both, okay? But they're not all on the same, okay? They're not all on there. We can still create prop types for it, and I want to show you how to conditionally render something. So this is probably the most important, I would say, the most important part of this entire lesson is conditionally rendering something, because this is something you are going to use a lot, all right? So let's come into our prop types here. Let's go, boom, boom, boom. I think that's it, right? Yep. And let's go next evolution. Okay, so what type is next evolution? What type should it be? We will. Should be an array, right? Cool. So I can come in here and say that array. Why is that not working for me? Ah, yes, there we go. That is the next one. All right. Okay, there we go. Okay, so it should be an array. Okay, is an array going to satisfy everything in here? Could we define this prop better? Yeah, we can do array of, right? We can do an array of objects. That would be great. What else could we do on here? I'm going to do array of. What would work well for this next evolution? Yeah, we have an array. And inside of that array, we could have multiples, but we're going to have shape. Yeah, let's do shape. The shape's going to allow us to also say number and name in there, okay? And what types are number and name? Strings. Yep. Let's go build that out. All right. So why isn't this breaking when we have Pokemon that don't have an next evolution on them? Yeah, it's not required, right? We didn't require this in here. If I said, then we're going to get broken, right? Because this third one on there doesn't have an next evolution, so I just evolved to G kept, right? So we don't have an is required. So now let's go and say we want to use that next evolution inside of the inside of here, inside of this the cards for the individual Pokemon. So I want to map over the next evolution, and I want to display the name of the Pokemon it can evolve into. How should I do this? I'm just going to map over them, all right? Because we know that next evolution is an array, right? And I'm going to go evolution. I'm just going to call it that. Why did I keep writing this wrong? There we go. And then I'm going to return C. Then I'm going to go evo.name. Okay. So this should work, right? I'm going to map over an array that's on the Pokemon, and I just want to return a paragraph tag with the name of that evolution. So why isn't this working right now? Anyone know why it's not working? Map and a map is okay. We can do that, right? But Matt really hit it on the head. It's because not every single one of these has a next evolution. So if we get to next evolution, if we get to this point and that Pokemon does not have a next evolution array, if I say map, it's going to say, I don't know what you're talking about. It's undefined. I can't map over something that's undefined. So I can't use it this way. What I can do is something called conditionally render this, okay? And we can use a ternary operator, or we can use a comparison operator as well. So let's do the ternary operator real quick, and then I'll show you the shortcut comparison operator. So a ternary operator, for those of you that are not familiar, is very simple. It's going to take something, let's say true, then console log, it is true. All right. Otherwise, console log, it is false. And let's just take this to our actual console. I'm going to throw this in there, and we're going to see at console log, it is true. So how a ternary operator works is going to take an expression, and it's going to determine whether that expression is a true or false. Okay, it is like a very compact if statement. So it's going to say, is this expression true or false? If it is true, which obviously true is, then it is going to either do this or return this or assign this. So I can, as someone mentioned last week, set a variable, so let's say, is true. I can set a variable to that, and that will assign it to that if I wanted to, okay? Otherwise, it's going to do this thing. If it is false, it is going to do this thing. This is a pattern that we see in React very often, and it is because we cannot use if statements in React, okay? So this is a ternary operator. We have an expression, whether it is true. If it is true, it'll go whatever is after the question mark. If it is false, it'll go whatever is after the colon. Okay, so you're going to have the expression, question mark, what you want it to do, colon, what you want it to do if it's false. Okay, so this is essentially the same as writing this. Okay, this is the question mark, this is the colon. All right, any questions about that right now? So it's the same exact thing. All right, this second, like this. And as Matt said, you can use it to assign it to a variable if you need to. These are almost identical right here, both of these. All right. I see some typing, so I'm going to give it a moment. The typing is taking, keep typing. I'm going to keep moving because we're running out of time here. But please keep typing. I would love to answer your question when it pops up. So we also need to understand something about type coercion. What does this coerce to? What types does this coerce to as far as Booleans go? It's for everyone. It's a question for you all. False, right? We know 0 is false. We know 1 coerces to true. What about this? An empty string is false. A string with something in it is true. Okay. What about this? Kind of a wild one. An array, whether it's empty or not, is always true. All right. Same with an object. Always true. What about this? Undefined will be false. Null will be false. These are a couple of little tricks you have to understand, and you should get familiar with what Boolean all of these things are going to coerce to. Okay, so when we're in here, I can say Pokemon dot next evolution. If there is a next evolution, whether there is something in that array or not, what will this coerce to? Truthy and falsy, correct. Whether there is something in it or not, if it is an array, it will always coerce to true. It will be a truthy value, okay? So if this is true, this will run. Does that make sense? We have that question mark there. Now we're still getting an error. So what we do is that. So now we can see if this is there, if this is true, if this evaluates to true, then we are going to run this map. Okay? If it evaluates to false, when would this evaluate to false? Yeah, if there was no next evolution, right? We see that we have no next evolution here, so that would be undefined, and undefined is false, right? And in that case, we're going to do nothing. We just return null. That's fine. Okay, and now let's look. Our application works, and it has our next evolutions on here. And this Venusaur doesn't have a next evolution, but it still works because it nulled it out, okay? So this is a pattern that you're going to see often, all right? Often in React. Real quick, I want to show you a simpler, also more magical and kind of cheatier way of doing it, is to manipulate our logical operators and say and. So let's think about this. We, in logical operators, and especially, if this is false, what will this entire statement be? The entire statement will be false if the left side is false. If the left side is false, the right side will never be evaluated. Okay? Keep that in mind. If the left side is false, that means both sides are false, and JavaScript doesn't even evaluate the right side. Okay? So we can say, if this is true, then it's going to evaluate the right side, and that's going to return that. All right? So then we get, this is a super hacky shortcut, but you'll see it very often in React. You get this like, if it's true, do this. If it's not, it's false, and it doesn't return anything. Yep. Those two ways, and let me do this. Okay. And those are the two ways that we will see things conditionally rendered in React. So if this is there, then render it. If this is there, then render it. Otherwise, don't render anything. This takes some getting used to. You're going to have to work with it and play with it a bit, and then you'll see it work. Okay, it is a little magical. You're going to have to learn, and this is going to have to, it takes a while, but these little like idiosyncrasies of JavaScript are going to be ingrained in your skull. If I do or, so let's think about this. If I do or, that's going to break it, because if the left side is false, that does not necessarily mean the entire thing is false. So it will run the right side, and when it runs the right side, it'll say undefined cannot be mapped over. So it only works with an and operator. Yeah, but that's what we're here for. Okay, that's what I've got for you today. That was, I think, the most important part was the very end, the conditionally rendering stuff. But it's all important. All right, that's what I've got for you tonight. Take this, run with it, have some fun. Like I said, this is a pretty straightforward day. We didn't cover a whole ton of crazy stuff today, but some fun and super useful material. So have fun with it. Have a great night, and I will see you on Thursday. Good night, everyone.